What's going on, everybody? Jay here from Tap and Turn Gaming. It's been a while since I've said that. Yeah, Derek and I are back at it. Wanted to get the channel up and running again. And Derek kind of touched base on why we've been on such a long hiatus. For me personally, there was a lot of stuff involved with my mother. She's 70 years old and needed to be in long-term nursing care, and many things needed to be done to get that in place for her. But I'm not going to get into big details about that, but that took up about a good year of my life, getting all those things in place so that she could get the care that she needs, and that I could, not stress out about it anymore. As you can see, also, new setting. I've recently moved as well. Had to sell my mother's home, unfortunately, to protect her assets in the home and whatnot. But new setting. I like it. My new apartment. It's very nice. I enjoy living here. But anyways, I don't want to get too deep into my my personal stuff. You're here for EDH MTG content. So without further ado, just kind of wanted to get that out of the way and explain ourselves a little bit why we've been away for so long. But today I'm going to bring you an EDH deck tech for Alela, Artful Provocateur. So it's a Esper colored general, and we're going to go take a look at the deck right now. I'm going to kind of walk through it a little bit. I'll kind of try to keep it similar to the way Derek did his video, where he kind of just did a quick run through of the cards and then kind of talked about some of the interactions and stuff like that that you can have with the deck. So with that said, let's take it to the table and take a look at the deck. Alright, so here we are at the table. I'm going to take a look at the deck and all the cards in it. Kind of going to skim through it real quick, just kind of show you the cards, and then we'll go over some individual kind of interactions and synergies and whatnot. So first and foremost, the general is Alela, Artful Provocateur. She's an Esper colored legend, 1 a white, a blue, and a black for a 2/3 legendary fairy warlock with flying, death touch, and lifelink. So some nice pretty keyword abilities there. She gives all your other creatures with flying +1/+0, and whenever you cast an artifact or enchantment spell, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. So every time you cast, which is an important wording on that, the spell that you cast doesn't need to resolve. So once you cast a spell, you're going to get the fairy whether or not your opponent counters the spell or whatever. You're still going to get that fairy just off the cast trigger. So that's pretty good. The fact that she kind of gives a little bit of an anthem effect to all your fairies is really nice. But, that second ability, generating the fairies is what we want to be doing in this deck. So that's kind of more or less what Alela does, and you're going to see in this deck just about every single creature in my creature base is like an enchantment creature from Theros, either like OG Theros or the new Theros Beyond Death set, just to maximize that token generation off of her. So that's pretty much the general in a nutshell. First up, we'll take a look at our creature base, and we're going to go from lowest converted mana cost to highest. And again, we're going to kind of just skim through this pretty quick. Not going to take up too much time talking about each individual card, but we have Alseid of Life's Bounty for the protection. We have Aegis of the Gods to give ourselves hexproof to stop our opponent from maybe targeting us with discard or sacrifice effects or whatnot. And those first two cards were enchantment creatures, so you're going to see a lot of these are going, once we cast them, they're going to trigger our general. Not an enchantment creature, but Starfield Mystic lets our enchantments cost 1 less, and whenever we cast an enchantment, whenever an enchantment we control goes to the graveyard, he gets bigger. Auramancer lets us take back enchantments from the graveyard. Callaphe, Beloved of the Sea, basically makes it so that our opponents have to spend more mana to target our stuff. We have Daxos the Returned. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we get an experience counter, and then we can use that ability to make like spirit creature tokens equal with power and toughness equal to the number of experience counters we have. Grim Guardian, whenever we proc Constellation, he drains each opponent for 1 life. Hana Ship's Navigator lets us take back artifacts and enchantments from our graveyard to our hand, which is very nice. If our opponent starts removing things, we can use that to get them back. Harvestguard Alseids, another Constellation card. Whenever we trigger this, we can prevent all damage that would be dealt to target creature this turn. Heliod Suncrowned, another one of the enchantment creatures in the deck. He's a god, he's indestructible, he does all kinds of things, but whenever we gain life, we can make something bigger, and then we can give something lifelink, so that's always nice. Mesa Enchantress for the card draw when we cast an enchantment. Riptide Chimera lets us take back an enchantment we control to our hand at the beginning of our upkeep, so we can reuse ETB effects. Soulreaper of Mogis lets us sacrifice creatures and draw cards. Agent of Erebos lets us exile people's graveyards. Archon of Sun's Grace is pretty nice. We like the constellation on it, so whenever we have an enchantment enter the board, we get a 2/2 white flying Pegasus. Afara, God of the Polis, another god. We basically like this because we can draw cards off of it. So at the beginning of each upkeep, if we had another creature enter the board under our control, we get to draw our card. Another one of the gods, Erebos, Bleak-Hearted. We like this because we can draw cards off it when our stuff dies by paying 2 life, and then we can also sacrifice creatures to give other creatures the weakness effect, and those 2 abilities kind of bounce off of each other. Shimmerwing Chimera is very similar to Riptide Chimera. We can bring back an enchantment from our on our board to our hand on our upkeep, so we can essentially reuse enter the battlefield effects. Thassa Deep Dwelling, another god. She's basically just a flicker on a stick. So at the beginning of each end step, or the beginning of our end step, we can flicker something out and it comes right back to the board to abuse enter the battlefield effects. Zur the Enchanter, when he attacks, we can search for an enchantment CMC 3 or less and put it straight onto the battlefield, so that's always nice, and you'll see why that's nice in our actual enchantment package in a little bit. Doomwake Giant, whenever we trigger Constellation, all of our opponent's creatures get -1/-1, so if we can chain that together, we can do some pretty dirty things. Urtai the Corrupted lets us sacrifice a creature or enchantment to counter target spell. So seeing as we're very... this deck is basically extremely enchantment heavy. I went more towards the enchantment route than the artifact route, but we do have some artifacts in the deck. Then we have Whitewater Naiads. We trigger that Constellation, we can make something unblockable. Archetype of Finality gives all of our creatures Death Touch and makes it so that our opponent's creatures can't gain or have Death Touch. And if they have it, they lose it. Athreos Shroud-Veiled, another god. At the beginning of our end step, we put a coin counter on something, and whenever a creature with a coin counter on it dies, we get it back to our side of the field. And then lastly, Silent Sentinel. When he attacks, we can resurrect an enchantment from our graveyard straight to the battlefield. So that is our creature package. Next up, we will take a look at our enchantment package that are not also creatures, which is also a pretty hefty portion of the deck, and we're going to go from lowest CMC to highest CMC. So we got Flickering Ward to give something protection. We can pay a white to return it to our hand. So, you know, if something gets targeted with some other type of removal that doesn't protect it from, we can bounce that to our hand and then reuse it. Phyrexian Reclamation for some creature recursion. Vampiric Rites for a sacrifice outlet that gains us life and draws us cards. Omen of the Sea, nice little flash enchantment, lets us scry 2, then draw our card, and then we can sacrifice it to scry 2. Staggering Insight is an aura, gives the creature +1/+1 lifelink whenever they hit an opponent, we get to draw our card. Banishing Light. So now you're going to see a lot of my spot removal is enchantment-based, like white enchantment-based spot removal. So things like this Banishing Light, when it comes in, we can exile a non-land permanent until this leaves the battlefield. This is why Zur is very good, so we can, you know, fetch up all of our like enchantment-based spot removal with him when he attacks, and get rid of a problem permanent. So that's that, Banishing Light. Then we have Detention Sphere. Basically kind of the same deal. We can exile a non-land permanent not named Detention Sphere, and all their permanents with the same name as it. So we can target, like, you know, someone's playing a token deck, we can target one of their tokens and that will exile all of their tokens as long as they're the same type of token with the same name. Like Saprolings, for instance. Then we have Estrid's Invocation. We can basically have this come into play as a copy of any enchantment, except at the beginning of our upkeep we can exile this and then return it to the battlefield. So we can copy something, and then if we see something better that we want to copy, we can essentially trigger that effect, get it back, and then make it copy something else. Ghostly Prison for some nice kind of pillow fort action, makes it so that our opponents have to pay 2 generic with each creature they control to attack us. Gift of Immortality for some creature recursion. Whenever the creature that has this on it dies, it comes back to the board. And then this gets returned to attach to the creature. And this happens at the beginning of the next end step. Grasp of Fate, another white enchantment-based spot removal, except this lets us pick a non-land permanent for every opponent that we have. So in a multiplayer EDH game, very good. Attrition, another sack out that lets us destroy a target non-black creature. So, you know, with all the little fairies that we're going to generate with Alela, we'll have plenty of fodder for that. And it's an enchantment, so it will get us a fairy when we cast it. Imprisoned in the Moon lets us enchant a creature, land, or planeswalker, and then that becomes a colorless land with no other types or abilities. So shuts down any one of those things that you enchanted on. Oblivion Ring, pretty much another Banishing Light, lets us exile something and then it'll come back if that leaves the board. Treacherous Blessing lets us draw 3 cards when it enters the battlefield. Whenever we cast a spell, we lose a life, but that's not really that bad. The initial bonus from that is really nice, but when this gets targeted, we have to sacrifice it. But if we have like our Shimmerwing Chimera or Riptide Chimera, we can just bounce it back to our hand. Then we have Cast Out, another white enchantment-based exile effect, but this has flash and cycling, so we can cycle it away if we don't need it. Conclave Tribunal, same deal, but it has Convoke, so we can lower the cost by tapping creatures we have. Leyline Anticipation lets us cast non-land cards as though they had flash, so being able to cast our like enchantment-based spot removal with flash is pretty nice. Dictate of Erebos is essentially a Grave Pact effect, but this costs 1 more, but it has flash. Whenever one of our creatures dies, each other opponent has to sacrifice a creature. Elspeth Conquers Death has lots of text on it, but basically we like it because it lets us exile something with CMC 3 or greater, and then that last chapter lets us take back a creature or planeswalker from our graveyard to the board, and then put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then lastly, Sigil of the Empty Throne. Whenever we cast enchantment, we get a 4/4 angel, so that's always nice. So that's our enchantment package. Next up, we'll take a look at our instants, which there's very few. We only have 4, and it's all counter magic, just to kind of keep us protected from certain big nasty spells that we don't want to have resolve. Disallow lets us counter a target spell activated or triggered ability. Dissipate lets us counter a spell and it exiles the spell instead of going to the graveyard. Render Silent counters a spell, and then its controller can't cast spells for the rest of the turn. And then Undermine lets us counter a spell, and the controller of the spell loses 3 life. So that's our instants. Not very many, but all counter magic. Next we have our sorceries. We also only have 4 sorceries. We have Dance of the Manse. Whatever we pay for that X cost, we can return X target artifact and or non-aura enchantment card, with converted mana cost extra less from our graveyard to the battlefield. And then if X was 6 or more, all of those things that come back are also 4/4 creatures. Idyllic Tutor is just a tutor for an enchantment card, which is almost every single card in our deck. Extinguish All Hope lets us destroy all non-enchantment creatures, so pretty much just about every creature that we have is not going to be affected by that. And then Open the Vaults lets us return all artifact and enchantment cards from all graveyards to the battlefield under their owner's control. That will more than likely benefit us a lot more than it would our opponent. But, you know, you'd have to kind of weigh the pros and cons of that, depending on what other people are playing. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at our lands, which is the last portion of the deck. So we're going to take a look at our lands that produce, let's see, we're going to take a look, oh no, I'm sorry, we still have our artifact package. My apologies. Pretty much all mana rocks here, so, you know, this is basic affair. You all know what these things do. Sol Ring, Arcane Signet, Azorius Signet, Dimir Signet, Orzhov Signet, Chromatic Lantern, Commander Sphere, and then Bident of Thassa, which I put into the artifact package. But whenever one of our creatures hits a player, we get to draw a card. That second ability we don't really care too much about unless we absolutely need to use it, but we basically just have that there so that we can draw cards when our stuff hits the player. Alright, now we will move on to the lands. Take a look at the two lands that produce all three of our colors first. We have Command Tower and Arcane Sanctum. Those are our only two lands in the deck that produce all three of our colors. Next we will look at the lands that produce blue and white for us. So we have Temple of Enlightenment, Prairie Stream, Port Town, Hallowed Fountain, Glacial Fortress, Azorius Chancery, and Adarkar Wastes. Next we'll look at the lands that we have that produce blue and black. So we have Underground River, Temple of Deceit, Morphic Pool, Sunken Hollow, Dimir Aqueduct, Dark Slick Shores, which actually is supposed to be a watery grave. I just didn't have any watery graves, but it's going to be a Dark Slick Shores until I get a watery grave. Choked Estuary, and Drowned Catacomb. Then we're going to take a look at our lands that produce Orzhov, or white and black. Tainted Field, Orzhov Basilica, Isolated Chapel, Godless Shrine, Concealed Courtyard, Temple of Silence, and Caves of Koilos. Then we're going to look at our kind of utility lands, or lands that you know, do produce, some of them produce colors, but some of them have nice little effects tacked onto them as well. So we have Vault of the Archangel to use that ability to give our team Death Touch and Lifelink. We have Hall of Heliod's Generosity, which is basically a Volrath stronghold just for enchantment, so we can use that and put an enchantment from our graveyard on top of our library. Halimar Depths to look at our top three and put them back however we want. Esper Panorama lets us search up for a basic Plains Island or Swamp and put it onto the board tapped. Then Bajuka Bog lets us exile somebody's graveyard. So that's our utility land package. And then lastly, our basic lands, which we have 2 swamps, 2 islands, and 3 plains. So that is the deck, all the cards in it. As far as, you know, specific little kind of interactions and synergies and whatnot, you know, I mean, more or less the deck really just wants to cast a bunch of enchantments and just get value off of Alela. But, you know, some cool things that we can do. I did mention Zur the Enchanter. So, you know, whenever we attack with him, we can, you know, rip out an enchantment with CMC 3 or less and put it straight onto the board. Well, you know, that hits our, you know, our Treacherous Blessing, or our Oblivion Ring, or our Imprisoned in the Moon, or our Attrition, or Grasp of Fate, or Gift of Immortality. We have so many 3 CMC enchantments, and then ones that are even less. So just about every single one of our enchantments, Zur can rip out of our deck and put it straight onto the board, which is very toolboxy. So, you know, you can just rip out basically whatever you need for that given moment. You know, if you need a problem permanent off the board, you know, attack with Zur. He does have flying, so he is pretty evasive. You know, and then just get whatever enchantment that you need out of your enchantment package. You can also do that with your creatures as well, because most of our creatures are enchantment creatures. So, you know, like, these are all the, well, except that's not an enchantment, but like Soulreaper of Mogis, Riptide Chimera, Heliod, Harvestguard Alseids, that's not an enchantment, Grim Guardian, not Daxos, Callaphe, Aegis of the Gods, Alseid of Life's Bounty. So, you know, there's a whole bunch of creatures as well that we could rip out with Zur, you know, attack with them, and then, you know, bring out the likes of, like, Alseid of Life's Bounty, and then we can use that ability to sacrifice it and give something protection. You know, we can, you know, we can rip out a Harvestguard Alseids and then make it so that Zur doesn't take any damage. You know, there's so many things that you can do just with Zur himself. It's pretty bonkers just off of that attack trigger. But yeah, I mean, really what the deck just wants to do is just play a bunch of enchantments and get a bunch of fairies, and you know, our general pumps those fairies +1/+0, so, you know, we could just swing in with our army of fairies if we want, but we are pretty toolboxy. So, you know, again, with Zur, we can rip out all those things. You know, if we have the likes of like Leyline of Anticipation on the board, that allows us to play all of our enchantment-based exile effects with flash. So, you know, basically turning all of our Oblivion Ring style enchantments into like instant speed spot removal, which is pretty nice. I mean, yeah, the deck kind of just all is real cohesive. You know, I went real heavy with the enchantment package to make sure that I get the absolute most bang for my buck out of Alela. And again, you know, that cast trigger, it's just off of cast. The spell that you're casting doesn't have to resolve for you to get the fairy. So, you know, if I go to cast my Sigil of the Empty Throne and someone counterspells it, well, that sucks, but we still got the fairy off of Alela if Alela's on the board. So yeah, I mean, there's really not too much to talk about with the deck. The path to victory is pretty straightforward. You know, play a bunch of enchantments and get lots of fairies and kind of just beat your opponent down. And then, you know, we do have stuff, you know, again, like Sigil of the Empty Throne. Whenever we cast an enchantment, we can get a 4/4 angel, you know, so that's going to kind of up our damage output with Alela, because she's going to pump the angels, so they're going to be 5/4s. You know, there's just lots and lots of stuff that this deck can do. We have lots and lots of answers, you know, and then if we don't have something that allows us to, you know, play those at instant speed, or if we don't have Zur to rip them out, you know, we have a small counterspell package to kind of shore things up for us. So, you know, we can output the damage pretty quick, generating all the fairies. You know, we can kind of play more control-y with all of our enchantment-based removal and our, you know, counterspell package and stuff like that. So I think it's a pretty versatile deck, and I've yet to actually play it physically. I just finished building this deck recently, so, but yeah. That about wraps it up, guys, so let me know what you thought of my Alela deck down in the comment section down below. If there are any suggestions that you have for cards that you would maybe put into this deck that I maybe kind of had an oversight on, you know, let me know as well. If you did enjoy the video, hit that thumbs up button. It really does help out a lot, especially now that we're kind of back at it and we're looking to do weekly videos again. You know, if you crush that thumbs up button, it's going to put our videos in more people's recommended feeds. And if you're not already subscribed to Tap and Turn Gaming, go ahead and click that subscribe button. We really would appreciate that as well. And if you want to get notified each and every time we upload a new video here on Tap and Turn Gaming, click the little bell icon next to the subscription button and you will get notifications each and every time Derek and I upload a video here. So with that said, that wraps up everything. Again, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you later in the next one.